Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. I am John Ledyard. This is my boss, the one and only Scott Reynolds, and we are pumped to be here with you on the Pewter Report podcast on a Wednesday preview show, energized by our friends over at Celsius. Scott, we have a really enticing matchup. Everybody's going to look at the Falcons' record and say, oh, this team, they're bad. The Bucs should crush them. And I agree the Bucs should win the game. But this is not your typical, what are the Falcons, 4-8 or something like that football team. The Falcons have been in 4-9. They've been in the majority of their games this season, including against many good teams.
Yeah.
They just haven't been able to finish, and that's been a problem that's plagued them for a long time.
No, you're exactly right. And, this is a weird week because all of a sudden the Bucs have had COVID issues. They haven't had many issues in terms of their starters. They've had a couple guys in the practice squad. Some lower level players. Jaden Mickens was on the COVID list earlier this year, and you go all the way back to training camp with Keyshawn Vaughn. But now all of a sudden, special teams, hit with the COVID issue. We'll talk about that and certainly preview this Bucs-Falcons game, which is not going to be easy for the reasons you mentioned. A couple of key injuries. Ronald Jones for the Buccaneers having that pin inserted in his pinky. And then you got Julio Jones still out with a hamstring injury. He's a difference maker if he gets on the field alongside Calvin Ridley, who's having a great year. But first thing we got to do, John, is get this podcast energized by our good friends at Celsius. John, it's Wednesday, and that means I am back to orange, my friends.
Oh, wow. Is it Wednesday Orange Day?
It's become that. Monday's becoming like test a different flavor day. We don't do a podcast on Tuesday. And listen, I don't drink Celsius 7 days a week, folks. I don't, right? I don't need that much energy. But certainly during a busy football season, Monday, which is a huge day after game day, I need it. I usually have one on game day. Certainly on Wednesday, which is another busy day, we've got conference calls, a lot of writing to do, a lot of reporting, and this orange gets me through, folks. The one thing that you've come to know by now, I think, if you've been a loyal viewer and listener to the Pewter Report podcast, is Celsius powers active lives every day with essential functional energy. What I love about it, John, is it's got no sugar, no preservatives, and you know what? A lot of times, energy drinks, you'll get that crash. Maybe you don't know this because you really weren't an energy drinker, until you tried out Celsius.
Until Celsius, correct?
Yeah, but the thing is a lot of times, I'm not going to name other companies, but you would drink an energy drink, it works for a little bit, and then you get a couple hours later a crash. Well, that doesn't happen with Celsius, at least not to me. So this is the time. This is the season of giving. So whether it's you want to give Celsius to some of your coworkers, some of your friends, some of your relatives, or if you want Celsius for yourself, here's what you do. You can go to Celsius.com and find their store locator and then go there and purchase as much Celsius as you want. Or you can go to the PewterReport.com website, click on the Celsius banners. They're going to take you to Amazon, where you can order in cases of Celsius and save money. If you're not sure which one you like, whether it's orange or the Fuji apple pear that I tried, or the jackfruit that you tried last week, it's really easy. Get the variety pack. That way you can sample all the different flavors of Celsius. So we appreciate Celsius' support, and make sure that you support Celsius because of the great work they do here to help the Pewter Report podcast. John, big game this week as the
big breaking news, Scott, actually, just while you were doing that Celsius read. Ronald Jones placed on the reserve COVID-19 list. So already kind of in doubt for this week with the finger, or in question with this week for the finger. So now he's on the COVID list. This is not as big of a concern as in Ronald Jones won't play in this game. Here's why it's a big concern, Scott. Now we've seen Ryan Suckup and Zach Triner and Bradley Pinion placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. Still waiting to see kind of what happens in that situation, who ends up coming off the list. But Ronald Jones placed individually on the list here. We don't know at this time whether he's tested positive or anything like that, or whether he was just a close contact of someone, but it would be someone else not probably those guys. Otherwise, he would have gotten put on the list when the specialists got put on the list. So
yeah,
we'll see if this is the last ripple. That the two biggest things from this, Scott, that come to my mind is this the last ripple in the COVID-19 kind of pool that the Bucs will have to deal with during this week? Most teams, it tends to be one guy and a couple guys and then another guy, and so that is the thing to watch. The other thing is not so much a big deal not having Ronald Jones against the Falcons, in my opinion, but the guys that might replace him are a bigger problem. And I know that Sean McCoy played well in this last game, but Scott, I just don't know if he's the guy you want back there the full time. And then is Leonard Fournette going to come from being inactive to being the starter? I mean,
that's what's going to happen. You're going to have Leonard Fournette being the starter this week if Ronald Jones stays on that COVID list for sure. And then we still don't even know if let's say there was a close contact issue and he's eligible to play after a couple of negative COVID tests later this week. If he's eligible to play, how's that finger going to hold up on Friday? And is it going to be a game time decision? What if he goes out there, takes a couple handoffs from Brady, in pregame warmups, and then he becomes a scratch on Sunday? So a lot of mystery that will be unraveled by 1:00 on Sunday for sure. But certainly right now, I think you would have to list Ronald Jones, in my opinion, as doubtful for this game because of that double whammy with the finger and also with the COVID. And yeah, Leonard Fournette would be the starting running back. That's something that Bruce Arians shared with us today on the conference call. Mm-hmm. And I think LaShawn McCoy would certainly be in that third down role that he played very well last week, John.
Yeah, he did. And that's the role you kind of want him in, I guess. But then it's also like Leonard Fournette, he just was inactive for a reason because he's not very good. So it's just funny that. All of a sudden he can be plugged in the lineup and look like, okay, if he's your best option, whatever, but you better not be coming out with any run-heavy approach and trying to run the ball on first down. Get that out of here.
John, the title of this podcast is Prepare for an Air Raid, and that's what we're going to get, damn it.
Right. We're not talking about the Air Raid scheme.
We're going to get the Bucs throwing the ball on Sunday. This is going to be like the old Arena Football League. This is going to be like Big 12 football we're watching here on Sunday.
That's honestly what we're talking about, Scott, because, we already have, in the Bucs and the Falcons, we already have two teams that love to throw the football. They are pass-heavy teams. Don't care what they're trying to tell you at either coaching staff. These are teams that want to throw the football, and the injuries to Todd Gurley lately for the Falcons have made them even more that way. Obviously, Ronald Jones' status could make the Bucs even more that way, and especially the fact that they seem to have soured, understandably so, on Leonard Fournette. So, again, it's kind of like all these pieces you're looking at, and you're saying this is probably going to be, a pass-heavy attack that we're going to see. Now, also to note, the Bucs are the team that in neutral situations, first and second downs with the win percentage between 25 and 75% and excludes under the 2 minutes left in the half. So, again, we're talking about neutral situations where run and pass have more of a fair idea of being operated from in either perspective. So teams could run or pass with equal propensity in these situations. Typically, the Bucs are being thrown on more than any other team in the league. 60% of the time in neutral situations, Scott, the teams are throwing the ball on the Bucs. They can't run it on them, and most teams haven't had success running on the Bucs this season. B, it's been like taking candy from a baby to throw against them most of the season. Right. If you can protect, that's the key. And the Vikings couldn't. And the Falcons are not far down this list either. They're like 8th or 9th, something like that, in terms of the defensive neutral pass rate. So teams are throwing on the Falcons as well in these situations because you can pass the ball in both of these teams. The Falcons just have not had a ton of success as a secondary, and injuries have been a big part of that, Scott. They weren't going to be a great group coming into the year probably, and now maybe their best player coming into the season, Ricardo Allen, although he's probably one of the more unsung players, is hurt and missed the last game, maybe missed a couple games. He has a concussion. He did not practice today either. So it's shaping up to be a game where the Bucs throw the ball a lot, and I think they can do it successfully too.
Yeah, I think so. And I look at the Falcons defense, and really there's not a lot of star power there except right down the middle, right? You got Deion Jones, who's a fantastic inside linebacker. He's the guy that won the game for the Falcons last year, picking off Jameis Winston on that errant throw to Cameron Braid in overtime, first play of overtime, right, that sealed the Bucs' fate at 7-9. And what I like about this guy, and he's really what the Bucs want Devin White to be, right? He's got the sideline to sideline speed, but the instincts in this guy and the complete game that he has. He already has 2 interceptions this year, including a 67-yard pick six. He's got a forced fumble, fumble recovery, 6 pass breakups, 3.5 sacks. He really is a do-it-all linebacker. He can go north and south and east and west, and he's that complete linebacker that the Buccaneers are really hoping that their own LSU linebacker, Devin White, can be. You've got Keanu Neal, who is kind of a do-it-all safety as well. He's not, I don't think, as good in pass coverage as some safeties, but he's certainly really good in the box and in run support. And maybe that's a matchup that you can put Rob Gronkowski on Keanu Neal and maybe win there. And then, of course, Grady Jarrett, right? They're Pro Bowl defensive tackle, 47 tackles this year, 3 sacks. He's a disruptor and a big-time presence inside. And I look at the Falcons, and they're strong up the middle, but really on the outside. And AJ Terrell, he's been okay in pass coverage. He's got a handful of pass breakups. He's got 1 interception, but he's kind of a tough guy in run support. He's got 3 forced fumbles too, which is second on the team. So I think there's some matchups in that secondary. And you look, a lot of teams have thrown the ball all over the place on Atlanta's secondary, and really Justin Herbert was the last one, although he didn't blow up. He only had 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. But certainly, was able to find some ways to exploit that defense. And I think that's been kind of the Achilles heel this year, is the Falcons defense.
Yeah, I mean, the Atlanta's defense has had talent, but the problem is they don't have a ton of it, especially on the edge. They've been trying to find edge pass rush potential, and they are starting to rush the passer a little bit better in recent weeks, which has helped them, but it's still Grady Jarrett and a bunch of guys for the most part. I know Dante Fowler's a name, and I apologize to all the Florida fans that just heard me say that, but the reality is Dante Fowler, especially coming to Atlanta this offseason, has been a huge bust for the Falcons in terms of what he's been able to produce and give them. So they are they haven't found ways to impact the pocket consistently, and they're very young or inexperienced at the cornerback position. Isaiah Oliver's been kind of a bust for them as a second-round pick. Darquez Dennard was kind of a late free agent signing that's given them a little, again, run support for their corners, great. And that was something that was very poor for the Vikings last week. It allowed them to get some nice runs out of structure even. But AJ Terrell and Darquez Dennard, they've done a great job in that capacity. Right. But in coverage, all these guys can be beaten. Terrell is actually, he was one of the most criticized first-round picks by me. I loved AJ Terrell. I was kind of on his side a little bit with that pick. He was one of the most criticized first-round picks probably in that draft. And according to Pro Football Focus, at least, he is the second highest defensive grade of any rookie. In fact, he and Chase Young, who is the highest, are the only 2 defensive rookies in the NFL right now with grades over 70 for Pro Football Focus. So I've seen some of AJ Terrell, rough start to the season. He's still getting beat, but every rookie corner is, and he's also made a bunch of plays. And he's been in great position for a lot of the plays he's given up. He needs to find the football. So there are still plays to be had there. I do not think AJ Terrell is going to shadow Mike Evans or anything like that. If they're smart, I think this is going to be a game where the Bucs are going to have matchups they can win really across the board. I bet you see, especially with Rojo, I bet you see a lot of 2-eye safety looks from Atlanta, even if it isn't their given propensity per se. The question is, will Ricardo Allen be back there? Typically, this has been a single high heavy team, I think. And so, with Ricardo Allen played free safety and Keanu Neal buzzing down and matching up in the slot against tight ends and such, we'll see if they alter their approach at all. But Sheridan Eastman got some praise from Raheem Morris for his play last week at free safety in place of Ricardo Allen. So we'll see what they have to offer. But if Allen isn't able to play again, I just think this really is a defense that you've got to be able to take advantage of. And they've given up a ton of big passing plays this year. And Bruce Arians is kind of licking his chops, looking to come out aggressive against Atlanta. Exactly.
Let's continue to talk about the Falcons defense and how much it matches up with the Bucs offense. But first, let's go down that injury report list, John, for the folks that are listening and watching out there live. Jamel Dean, groin strain, and he's limited. Joe Haig did not participate today with an illness. Ronald Jones did not participate either with that finger, obviously. And then 2 guys were limited for the Bucs that participated. Jason Pierre-Paul with that knee injury he's been battling all year, as well as Steve McLendon with the elbow. For the Falcons, the list is longer. The players that did not participate are Darquez Denard, quadriceps, Ricardo Allen. We talked about that with the concussion issue. Julio Jones with the hamstring. Caleb McGarry, not injury related, did not participate. The players that were limited, James Carpenter with the groin, the guard, defensive tackle, Marlon Davidson with the knee injury was limited, as well as Stephen Means, who's kind of their designated pass rusher with a hand injury. Calvin Ridley hurt his foot late in the game, stayed in the game against the Chargers, who was limited today in practice. Keith Smith, the fullback, also limited with the neck injury. And Mikael Walker, linebacker, shoulder injury, limited. So
he's flashed some too. He's been kind of their coverage backer. And so there's a bunch of names on that list. I mean, we'll see how they end up. I think a lot of them didn't play last week, so maybe they're holding them out for this matchup. But,
John, you talked about the lack of pass rush, right? And they've really been trying. I mean, Dan Quinn was the defensive line coach up there in Seattle. And so they've really tried to fortify that defensive line for some time now. It's kind of been his undoing, right? That's part of the reason why he got fired, because the defense just wasn't there. The pass rush wasn't there. They've got 25 sacks so far this year. And you look at it, Deion Jones leads the team at the linebacker position with 3.5. We talked about Grady Jarrett with 3. Stephen Means, who's a former Buccaneer from way back in the day, 3 sacks as a situational pass rusher. Charles Harris, former first-round pick, who's kind of been bumped around the league, 3 sacks. You mentioned Dante Fowler. He only has 2 this year. And then, you look at the guys that they've parted ways with, Tack McKinley and Vic Beasley. Those were first-round busts, essentially. They're no longer in Atlanta for a reason. They couldn't get to the quarterback. And John Kaminsky, they spent a mid-round pick on him a couple years ago. He's just kind of a stiff, run-stuffing defensive end, only has 1 sack. So you look back at John, and obviously Tom Brady is a different quarterback when he is protected. And I think that when you look at the pass protection last week, not allowing a sack, they need to do that again. And when I watched on film, when I watched the Falcons-Chargers game earlier today, was that the defense was having to go to an underfront to get an extra linebacker up there to kind of give the team an extra pass rusher in certain situations, or at least present a 5-man front. But like you said, you can't do that if you're playing cover 2. So it will be interesting to see. The Falcons only generated 1 sack of Justin Herbert last week. And so I wonder if they're going to try to pressure Brady early like they tried last week against Herbert. And if it doesn't work, they're just going to have to fall back to cover 2. Yeah,
that's going to be a really – I mean, they're going to be – if you're the Falcons and you're trying to draw up a scheme defensively, you know what's coming. Like, even without the Ronald Jones news, I think you know what's coming in this game. You know the Bucs just were patient for a whole game. That's just not going to last with Bruce Arians, man. He's going to come out swinging in this game, I think, trying to make some statements. And so, I think that they know that, I think. And so it's about, okay, so what are we going to do? I mean, I don't know how you have to blitz if you're Atlanta. Like I think you have to be able to get after the quarterback, and you have to take chances. You're going to leave guys one-on-one and leave guys exposed. Yeah, it's a risk, but I just don't know how can you look at what the Vikings did and just be like, oh, this is okay. I mean, the only time the Vikings didn't really even get home on the blitz very often. But they threw a couple blitzes out there, and the Bucs are just a team that, if you look at their issue, they've had issues with hots sometimes at times this season, getting on the same page with those. And so if you're the Falcons, you have to go to something like that. Like, you can't just I mean, this team has given up 50, 20+ yard pass plays this season. Like, that's the most in the NFL. Like, you're going to get shredded if you don't impact the pocket. And Brady's shown, he's always kind of been his one thing. If you force him off his spot, easier said than done. But if you force him off his spot, you can get some inaccurate throws from him. And so I think if you're the Falcons, I mean, they're sending pressure. They're blitzing now at a percentage that's over 31%, which is, outside the top 10 in the league, probably close to the middle of the league type of rate. But this would be one where I think they probably are upping that a little bit. And they are getting pressure this season. They're getting pressure at a top 10 rate, just barely top 10 rate this season with their defense. So they have been able to generate some pressure with blitzes in certain matchups and games. And that's kind of been the chunk of it. It hasn't been a consistent thing for them, I think. But that is kind of what they're going to have to do in this game. I don't think they can sit and be comfortable kind of just playing coverage and hoping that Brady doesn't pick them apart, because if they're not kind of forcing the issue, I think they're not going to have much success. But for the Bucs, I mean, to be honest, in this game, I think you have to be aggressive too. I mean, this is, you don't want the Falcons to hang around, not because the Falcons can close games. We know that's been an issue, but because it's a team they can score. The Falcons can absolutely score. That's something that's very abnormal about teams that are typically in their position where they're I think they're already officially limited. Yeah, they're already officially eliminated, I'm sure. So, there aren't a lot of teams that can score like Atlanta can at this point in the season, that kind of a record. One thing I will say, though, as we talk about this Falcons offense, this red zone team is they are just brutal in the red zone on offense, and they're great in the red zone on defense. And it's so weird, Scott. Like, this is not a good defense, and it is an offense with a ton of talent. And I know Julio's been hurt kind of in and out during the season, but they still have a ton of talent, and they just can't finish in the red zone. I mean, this is what's their ranking? 31st in the red zone.
Right.
And a year where across the league, red zone numbers are higher than they've ever been. It's like a red zone boon this season. I mean, it's just crazy. The Titans were over 70% last year, and that was viewed as like unsustainable. This year, we've got the Bucs are over 70%, and they're like 6th or 7th in the NFL. So it's just been crazy how good red zones offenses have been in the NFL, and the Falcons still down at the bottom of the league. But they have the 4th best red zone defense, Scott. It's just crazy. Situational football is flipped.
It really is. And I think when you look at Dirk Koetter, who's calling the plays.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah, he's had some red zone struggles in his career, hasn't he?
Yeah, he really has, right? We've seen those in Tampa. Yeah. But the thing is, Dirk Koetter loves the tight end. And when I watch the film, I see, plenty of tight end usage, right? There's a couple of tight ends on, they use a lot of 12 personnel. Mm-hmm. And they kind of give you the illusion of running the ball. And you look at Hayden Hurst, who's their kind of breadwinner at the tight end spot, and then Jaden Graham is the other one. Both of those guys only caught one pass last week, and Hayden Hurst, I mean, he has Falcon fans just scratching their heads. There has been zero production from this guy really over the last month of the season. Now, the Falcons have been 1-3 in their last 4 games. Their loss to the Saints at New Orleans.
Yeah,
he was targeted twice, had 0 catches. In their big win against the Raiders, 43-6, Hayden Hurst had 4 catches, 8 targets for 48 yards. But the last 2 weeks, the rematch against the Saints, he had 4 targets, 1 catch for 9 yards. And then in last week's game, a head-scratching 1 catch for 7 yards. And so for as much as Dirk Koetter has that MO of liking to throw the ball to the tight end, we saw a lot of production from both O.J. Howard and Cam Brate down here when Dirk was calling the plays. The tight end position just has really been non-existent over the last month of football. Maybe that changes with Devin White coming to town. Who knows?
Yeah, it really is kind of the thing for the Bucs. I mean, if you were going to figure out how to defend this Falcons team, typically the Bucs have had a lot of, look at last week, even like Irv Smith and Tyler Conklin are lighting them up. We've seen tight ends score consistently against the Bucs this season, and they haven't found like a matchup guy for tight ends per se this year. So a lot of tight ends have been able to produce against them. I think that in this matchup, it kind of goes in the Bucs' favor because, like you said, that Falcons have not had a dynamic player in that regard. Hayden Hurst was traded for a 2nd-round pick. I still think they're going to try to get him involved. I don't think he's anything special, but he's a decent tight end. It was a dumb trade. Don't get me wrong. I bashed the trade up and down. There's not much more to say about that, but I still think he's a guy that can be effective. And we just saw Tyler Conklin and Irv Smith, who aren't exactly, household names yet, lighting up the Bucs. And so I think that the Falcons are going to see that, and they're going to utilize that. I don't think there's any question about that in my mind. The question really in this game becomes, does Julio Jones play? Obviously, that's a huge part of it because he's, when he's healthy, he's probably, you can still make that case. He's the best receiver in the league. But the other part of it is the Falcons are just kind of this complete boomer bust type of offense. Like they have a ton of 20+ yard plays, like 3rd most deep attempts in the league, 3rd most deep completions. We know this about Koetter, right? He loves to go deep, but they have 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on these plays. So it's been a lot of boomer bust. They also have the 6th longest time to throw of any quarterback this season, Matt Ryan has. And so he is taking his time in the pocket, but he's not always getting time. He's pressured a ton. He's sacked a ton, 6th most sacks, 6th most pressure dropbacks. And like I said, 6th longest time to throw. And so, there's kind of a lot of contributing factors here to why Matt Ryan is getting pressure. One of them is definitely the offensive line. We've talked about it. I think we talked about it last week, or maybe it was Sunday night. But Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul destroyed Atlanta in both matchups last season. A combined 28 pressures in 2 games, Scott.
Yes.
I mean, just Shaq Barrett had 18 by himself in their 2 games, and they obviously combined for 7 sacks as well. Barrett had 4, JPP had 3. I mean, those are just ridiculous numbers. So Todd Bowles
and by the way, John, they've been hot in the last 2 games, right?
That's right.
Of getting their pass rush revved up.
Yep.
And John, to your point about the Falcons offense being boom or bust, here's a couple of stats and numbers to back that up. If you remember back when they beat the Broncos 34-27, they put up a decent amount of points. The next week, though, at New Orleans, scored just 9 points in a 24-9 loss. Then came back, and of course the defense helped out, but 43-6 with a very convincing and surprising win over the Las Vegas Raiders. And then you've got the Saints rematch. It was a close game, but again, the Falcons offense just couldn't produce. Matt Ryan had been sacked 8 times by the Saints in the first game. So you're talking about giving up a ton of sacks. He was sacked 3 times in the rematch, and the Falcons scored just 16 points, losing 21-16. Then last week, 20-17 loss. Falcons offense could not get above 20 points again, and Matt Ryan threw 3 interceptions. So you look at Matt Ryan, since that win against Denver, he threw 2 interceptions against the Saints the first game with no touchdowns, and then 2 touchdowns, 1 interception against the Raiders, 1 touchdown, no interceptions against the Saints in the rematch. It wasn't enough. And then 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions in last week's game. And over that span, he's been sacked a total of 14 times in 4 games. So you're right. Getting to Matt Ryan does 2 things. You can get him on the ground and get those sack yardage rack ups. And we saw what happened last week against the Vikings when the Buccaneers were able to get to Kirk Cousins on 3rd down. It pushed them out of the red zone in some occasions and made those field goal attempts a little bit longer. Now, the thing is the Falcons actually have a pretty damn good kicker compared to the Vikings. Yeah. And they're not going to get bailed out by Dan Bailey's kicks. Young Hoku is having a Pro Bowl caliber season. 33 of 34 field goals this year, 97.1%. And he has missed just 3.
He's the reason Ryan Succop's not going to make the Pro Bowl.
That's right. Yeah, he's had that good of a year with only 3 missed extra points. So we've talked a little bit about the Bucs kicking situation, and if it's not Ryan Succop, that could be a bit of a game changer because Koo does not miss for the Falcons.
Right. I mean, again, like what you said, this, you'd hate to see this, but every Bucs fan is thinking this, Scott. We almost got through a season just when it looked like you're going to get through a season with no kicker issues and no problems. COVID-19 takes out your kicker. I just think Bucs fans got to be beside themselves about that. I mean, Greg Joseph, look, I said this on the radio this morning. Greg Joseph has had a good NFL career in the small sample size that we have. He came in Cleveland. He missed 3 kicks, I think, and they were all like longer kicks. I mean, we're talking he missed 1 from 50 plus and 2 from 40, but he made like 5 from 40 plus 2, and he only had 7 opportunities, I think. So he made everything inside of that, very similar to Succop in terms of his profile, like sure guy inside of that. He was good on it. Last year, Tennessee, he never got to kick a field goal in any of the games he played in, but 7 for 7 on extra points. So he hasn't missed a kick in a long time. I don't know what he's done in practice. Obviously, preseason this year. It's clearly an unknown, and obviously it's an uncomfortable situation, but the Bucs grabbed him as soon as they could, and they've kind of hung on to him, protected him on the practice squad all season.
Reasons like this.
Exactly right.
The thing is Koo has been money for the Falcons. Succop has been money for the Buccaneers this year. And folks, if you want some money, one place to go.
Yes.
It's MyBookie, right?
Yes.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, and it can't get here fast enough. We all deserve a win. We all deserve a little extra money in our pocket or perhaps our stocking, right? We all deserve to have a little fun. The only place you're guaranteed to get all 3 of those is at MyBookie. They're the only sports book that doesn't care whether you've been naughty or nice this year. They got gifts for everyone, whether it's the NFL, college football, the NBA is around the corner. So is the NHL. They've got all of your sports bets at one place. That's at MyBookie. Sign up today, receive the ultimate stocking stuffer. It's a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. That's a great place to start, but we all know Christmas is about what's under the tree. And at MyBookie, that means huge deposit bonuses, epic giveaways, and free contests. It's simple. Sign up, enter the promo code Pewter, and get your deposit matched halfway up to $1,000. Head over to MyBookie to make the most of your holidays this season and strut into 2021 with some cash in your pocket. This winter, bet with the best, bet with MyBookie. And John, I was able to jump on the Buccaneers earlier this week when the line was 5.5. It's now moved to 6. So I threw down with the Buccaneers at minus 5.5 for this game. I regardless about whether they won't have Rojo, regardless about whether they won't maybe have Ryan Suckup, I still think they win this game. I'm going to reverse course, and I just feel, because remember, I said I think the Buccaneers lose this game. Mm-hmm. In our Pewter Report roundtable a couple weeks ago, we had to pick how the season was going to play out. I said 3-1. I just kind of feel the Buccaneers are going to win this, and so I'm going to change my original prognostication, and I think the Buccaneers win this game.
Wow.
I didn't like what I saw on film when I watched the Falcons-Chargers game, and it's one game out of the 13 they played, or 12 games they played this year, 13, whatever it is. But
yeah,
I like the Buccaneers, and I like them so much. I went to MyBookie and I threw down. I also threw down, in case you're interested, and I'm not a gambling professional by any means. But the other game that really interested me was the MAC championship. I got Buffalo over Ball State minus 13.5. I like Buffalo's ground game. And so those are my two.
Going way off the beaten path.
Yeah. What did you for the money line too this week? I'm just going point spread. No money.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, Scott, when I thought about this game before we did the Vikings show, and I said, that's the one that I don't know. I felt like they would beat the Vikings. It started off a little scary, but I felt like they would beat the Vikings. It would, not shock me to see the Bucs lose like another game. Wouldn't shock me. I picked them to go 4-0, so that's probably how unless something changes or there's way too many COVID issues, that's probably how I'll end up picking this game. But the thing is, you always look for matchups, right? Why I picked the Saints and the Rams to win that game, and everybody was mad at me because they wanted me to pick the Bucs to win. But matchup wise, the Bucs it wasn't a good matchup for them unless you deviate from what you typically do. You have to change for teams that you play. And matchup wise, I don't really see, obviously anything can happen in a game, like the Bears game. Let's look, for example, like matchup wise, I don't think that was necessarily the biggest issue for the Bucs. Not having guys hurt mattered, but the Falcons, I don't, like I said, anything can happen. You can have fluke stuff happen. I mean, the Giants, look at that game. And so, but I just, on paper, it's hard to see like where Atlanta really has that matchup advantage. If Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones are both 100% and they're both banged up right now, then, maybe they have the matchup at one of those spots, and so there's individuals certainly where I'd say Atlanta has a chat, but schematically, like, what's Atlanta's strength that Tampa Bay can't deal with. They're just coming off a great red zone performance. They can get to the quarterback. They have tons of blitz stuff. Atlanta has not really shown an ability to stop that kind of stuff based on their past matchups or the season. Some of their linemen are hurt right now. Even if they play, Caleb McGarry has not been great this season again. And Jack Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul have taken him apart. Even Jake Matthews.
The chops if McGarry played on Sunday.
Right. I just don't, I don't think what Atlanta does matches up like bad with the Bucs. So again, I don't see the matchups in this one going Atlanta's way. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff matters. Now, we've talked about the COVID thing to an extent, but and there's only so much to say, Scott. But that worries me a lot. The fact that we're in this COVID situation, the Bucs have been one of the teams that have been least affected by it. Now you've got 3 guys going on the list. You got 1 guy going on the list today. Is it in 2 different? Right. That being Ronald Jones. And so is it in 2 different spots? Are these 2 different issues? Both have come into the locker room now and been around other players. You're coming off a game week, so everybody was here. It just does not bode well for how we've seen this thing kind of carry out. And it's too early to say, games in doubt or anything like that, or like, will the game get moved? But it's just something you got to keep an eye on when you have back-to-back days of people being placed on the list. We've seen that typically continue to move in a negative direction. So that's really where there's not a lot of analysis with that. It's just where my concern is at right now as I think about this game.
Yeah, and I think too, and talking about Rojo, being on that COVID list, we've talked about how this is going to be, an air raid type of situation, and it's just kind of crazy going back to Atlanta for a second. Todd Gurley, I know he's not been, 100% per se, but Ito Smith has been getting more carries and been more productive than Todd Gurley has, and you look at Gurley's production this year. They really counted on him to come and provide a boost to the ground game. It really hasn't materialized. He's got 645 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's always been pretty good at, in the red zone and around the goal line, but averaging a pedestrian 3.6 yards per carry. He only has 1 carry over 20 yards this year. It was a 35-yarder in his only 100-yard game, which was way back in October against the Panthers. So he's had 1 game over 100 yards. He's had 1 game over 75 yards. Actually, I guess 2 games when you count the 100-yard game. And over the last 5 games, he's only topped 50 yards 1 time. That was 53 yards in the win against Denver. And 6 carries, 19 yards last week. 8 carries, 16 yards the week before against the Saints. And he missed some time between both of those Saints games and had just 8 carries for 26 yards in the other Saints game. So he really has not been a factor. Ito Smith has been more of the factor in terms of not just running the ball, but also catching the ball out of the backfield. That's where he's posed a little bit of a danger. But even he has got 13 catches for 54 yards, a 4.2-yard average. He's more quick than he is fast, and I just don't see much from the Falcons' run game that really concerns me.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. I mean, the Falcons are actually running the ball at a rate that's around the league average. So I mean, they are kind of they've committed to it. Even and now obviously with Gurley out, I think they've thrown the ball more in recent weeks, if I'm recalling correctly, but it's not necessarily been like a real strength of their team, obviously. And so, I think that, early on in the season, they definitely ran it better and more often, I think, than they're running it now. And so, again, this is, like I said, everybody's throwing the ball in the Bucs these days. I mean, at a high rate, significantly higher than any other team in the league, the Bucs are getting passed on, especially in neutral situations. So, that it's about fixing that area of your defense if you're the Bucs. I said this, to you guys in the Pewter Report chat off the air, Scott, but it's kind of when you are great against the run, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because it's great to shut down. You're inviting the pass, right? Especially in neutral situations. Teams know in those situations where it's run pass, kind of up in the air, right? You're probably not in a great situation to run the football against the Bucs. So you're going to throw. And throwing is, by every analytic and stat that we have, a more effective way of producing offense, especially in neutral situations. So you are kind of the thing about being great against the run and that being your first priority is it can be good to do that, obviously, but it makes other teams be more aggressive against you in certain situations. And most teams that have had success, I mean, look at the Saints, the Rams, and the Chiefs. They barely even ran the ball or tried to run the ball against the Bucs. And the Saints did end up, because they had the huge lead, but almost every pass was complete in that game for the Saints. So, I mean, it was kind of like, all right, we can do whatever we want at that point now because the Bucs were kicking everything back. And so once in neutral situations, again, the Bucs are getting thrown on. It's not just because they're so dominant against the ground game. We saw the Vikings run it and have good amount of success against the Bucs. I don't think this is like, not anymore without Vea, as like the Ravens 2000 run defense or whatever. Early on in the season it really was, but at the same time that is encouraging teams to throw the ball, and that's putting them in a lot of bad situations too. One of the things,
what I liked was we saw a lot more 2 deep. We saw a lot more quarters.
Yeah, we saw more coverage variation for sure. Yeah. Yes,
we saw that in the Vikings game, and that's really what limited Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson to each having 39 yards receiving. You mentioned the tight ends that really got the yardage against the Bucs defense, but neither one of those guys. Irv Smith scored a touchdown against Devin White in coverage, but I just don't see Hayden Hurst or Graham being even in their class really in terms of a threat. And if that's where Matt Ryan wants to go with the ball, rather than Calvin Ridley or Russell Gage, so be it, right? I mean, I think that's exactly what Todd Bowles wants. So I think you're going to see a very similar game plan where the ball is going to be forced and funneled to the tight ends. And you just have to have Levante David, your safeties, and Devin White rally to make the tackle. Douglas O'Connor says, Keyshawn Vaughn time. John, I know that you are a huge proponent of using Leonard Fournette as much as possible, but would you mind if Keyshawn Vaughn got a couple of carries this week, assuming Ronald Jones doesn't play due to COVID or the broken?
Do you mean Sneak Vaughn? Is that
Sneak Vaughn, as our good friend Mark Cook likes to call him, Sneak Vaughn?
I would like to see the running back position utilized as little as possible, especially this week. I would like to see Vaughn play. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would like to see him play. Protection's big. Like, he has to know the protections, I think. But they say that he does. And so, yeah, play him, because last time we saw Fournette in protection, it was terrible.
Right.
And most of LaShawn McCoy's career over the last few years, especially, has been bad in pass protection. He was great in pass protection the other day. Big shocker to me. I didn't see much of anything coming from LaShawn McCoy that came the other day. So we'll see if it happens again. I think that's going to be the key, right? Like, they've dubbed Leonard Fournette this passing down guy. Clearly, that isn't how they view him anymore, because he would have been active, if at least for that capacity. So in their mind, at least, LaShawn McCoy and Keyshawn Vaughn were better options for that role last week than Fournette was. Otherwise, there was no other reason for those guys to be active over him if they didn't think they were better.
And Bruce Arians has talked about how Keyshawn Vaughn has looked in practice. Okay, well, if Rojo's not playing, he's going to be active. He's going to be being played special teams for sure. So get him a couple of touches, just like you did with LaShawn McCoy, a couple carries, couple pass catching opportunities. Let's see how much he's improved, because he's got 7 targets this year and 2 drops. Of course, one of those was the big fumble in Chicago. There was a big game changer right before halftime. But let's see how much this kid has progressed, because guess what? Shady's not going to be here next year. Neither's Fournette. So the Bucs are going to have to add another running back or two. Maybe it's James White. Maybe it's Rex Burkhead in free agency as that safety blanket out of the backfield for Tom Brady. Maybe they draft another running back because Ronald Jones will be in a contract year. You know the rule, John. You don't pay running backs, right? So you got to keep that conveyor belt going, and let's see what happens with Keyshawn Vaughn down the stretch, if he's a viable option to be RB2 next year, or if you got to go out and get somebody. Big Earn 849, our good friend, wants to know, John, if you can fill him in, what's the plan for kicker and punter? And let's also throw long snapper in there right now if the Bucs can't go.
Well, it'd be Greg Joseph at kicker, and it'd be Greg Joseph at punter. So you'd be doubling
Greg Joseph has been on the practice squad all year long, right? That's been the Bucs safety net there at the kicker position.
Right. So he would be the guy in kicker and punter that would go in those situations. They would just kind of make do. And then they said that Anthony Nelson, Bruce Arians said today, would be the long snapper, and Ryan Jensen would be the short snapper. And so that's probably how they'll handle those types of things. I'd imagine those guys have had some reps. We saw Anthony Nelson was getting some reps today in that capacity. And so, if that's what it takes, or, Greg Auman said there's some guys that they may have gotten into the COVID protocol process. He tweeted about some of those guys. Yeah. And so maybe those guys are options. Brett Mayer would be the kicker they'd add to the practice squad in case something were to happen to Greg Joseph. Right. You want to just have all your bases covered. I think Dustin Colquitt was or was it Britton? I don't remember. One of the Colquitt brothers, whichever one's, maybe both of them are free agents now. I don't know. One of them started the year with the Steelers, so I should know. But he got cut. He was terrible. And so one of them would be the punter, I think, in that situation, if they're able to get him through the protocols and everything's negative with him. So, again, we're just you're kind of preparing doomsday scenarios. Yeah. You're looking at, the worst possible thing that could happen, and you're preparing for those outcomes just in case. That's just the reality of the COVID era in the NFL. But you're right. That's the key. That could be a key to the game, is how well that battery – remember, it's not just about how good Greg Joseph is, but it's about the battery, especially if they have one day at a practice. How well do they operate together?
Well, yeah, and the thing is it doesn't matter who's kicking, right? If the snap isn't good, if the hold isn't true, right? The kicker doesn't have a chance anyway. So you're right, it is a battery. It's the long snapper, the holder, and the punter, and you can certainly guess that whoever comprises the battery on that Saturday walkthrough in Atlanta is going to get a ton of work. Probably all 2 hours of that walkthrough is going to be used doing nothing but snapping, holding, getting the placement down, and doing a couple of practice kicks for sure. That's going to be of utmost importance. Usually walkthroughs the day before the game, but that aspect of it is going to be really critical. Another thing that's critical, John, is missed tackles. We saw a bunch. Edward says there were 16 missed tackles. That sounds about right. I think I'm going to believe Bruce Arians a little bit when he says that was kind of a product of the Buccaneers having that week off and being a touch rusty, because let's face it, they're not doing any tackling. No team is tackling at this stage of the season in practice.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't afford the friendly fire accidents, etc., the injuries. So I did see the tackling improve as the game went on, so I'm going to buy that from Bruce. But that's certainly something where when you've got some fast receivers like a Calvin Ridley, like a Russell Gage, that you need to be able to limit or deny the yards after catch, because that's how those guys can really beat you. It's not just catching the ball and getting the air yards. It's also getting those yak yards after the catch too. Right.
I mean, that's one of the keys to this game, honestly, that can the Bucs do that better than they did in all facets, the run game as well, than they did, and really it's been the last couple of weeks that's been slipping a little bit. They were one of the better tackling teams in the league. Now, by most missed tackle metrics, they're closer to like league average, still a little bit better than average. I think the Falcons are right around the same area. And actually, it's funny, the Falcons are an okay tackling team, Scott, but they have actually allowed more yak this season than any other team in the league. Isn't even close. It's like 350-yard difference between them and the next closest team. It's totally outrageous how much yak the Falcons have allowed. And it's because they haven't missed that many tackles. Tells me that they're probably just not in position a lot of the time in coverage. So again, got to take advantage. I know the Bucs aren't this huge run after the catch offense in the passing game where they set guys up, but they've gotten a little bit of that involved with Antonio Brown. He's got to make plays and make people miss. Chris Godwin's got to make plays after the catch. That's something he did really well a year ago. People are like, why are his yards per catch so far down this season? It's really has less to do with where he's being targeted, more to do with the fact that Chris Godwin, much as I love him, and if Harold in him, he's not made a lot of plays after the catch this season. And so that, again, where's that playmaking ability with this receiving group, where they can break a tackle and make somebody miss and make plays after the catch? We have hardly seen any of that from a receiver, any of them this year, Scott. Like, it's crazy. I mean, that's one thing, as much as we've knocked Antonio Brown, he's definitely brought that. I bet I'll look it up actually while we're on the show, because it just popped into my head. But I bet Antonio Brown has forced as many missed tackles as Chris Godwin and Mike Evans all season, maybe combined. I mean, that's just, he's made people miss. It hasn't necessarily always equated into a big play, but that's one thing that he brings to them. And we said this when he was signed. That was the one big positive that we could see, was he might not be the vertical threat Scotty Miller is, but he can make people miss. Right. So maybe this is a big Antonio Brown game. I can tell you this, Scott, I'm tired of saying it's going to be a big Mike Evans game. He's playing fine. I mean, it's fine. He's producing fine, but it's just not, like, he's not going to have the 150
for fantasy football players, John. That's what you're saying, right?
That's right. I mean,
not the 150 yards receiving. It's not 10 catches. It's not 2 touchdowns.
Right. Gronk has a 100-yard game this year. Evans has 2. Yeah. And did Scotty have one? Godwin doesn't have one.
Godwin came close. But
Godwin came close a couple times. Yeah, he's like in the 80s.
Scotty Miller had one against
Scotty had one. Yeah. So again, it's been, Tom Brady is true to the script, man. It has been spread out. There has not been, it's this guy's week. It's not really even been that. Right. It's literally everybody every week. So
here's one thing too that I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention. The Falcons, they're pretty decent at manufacturing some points. Credit Dirk Koetter. Last week, you had Russell Gage throwing a 39-yard touchdown pass to Calvin Ridley out of a Wildcat formation. So you got one receiver throwing the ball to the other, and that worked out well. So, I don't know if we're going to see Russell Gage under center, but it's just one more thing the Bucs have to account for. If you remember last year, John, the first touchdown pass that Matt Ryan threw, who was it to here in Tampa in that 28-22 Falcons overtime win? Ty Sambrailo.
Yes, Ty.
Lineman on the tackle eligible play. So that's one thing you have to account for is Dirk Koetter likes the trickeration. And if he does it, it's typically going to be in the first quarter to see if he can catch you napping. And the Buccaneers, let's face it, they've been asleep in the first quarter.
They have been snoozing in the first quarter.
Yes.
Scott.
So I would not be surprised at all if Dirk Koetter scripts a trick play of some kind, a deception play to catch the Bucs napping, because typically on defense they don't wake up till the second quarter. So that's just something that if I was Todd Bowles, I would be hammering all week long: is wake up. Kickoff's at 1:00. It's not at 1:30. It's at 1. So we got to be prepared if we take the field to start the game, or even if our offense goes down and puts 7 on the board, the first time we take the field, we have to be alert, because that's typically when Dirk Koetter likes to strike with those trickeration type plays.
Right. I mean, and if I'm the Bucs, they came out with a great approach against Minnesota, to be honest. Brady just missed a couple throws in the first 2 drives. I didn't have a problem with the coaching. I mean, they run on every first down. I think they need to stop doing that. But other than that, like I thought, there were plays they could have hit on those first couple drives, and then consistently throughout the rest of the game, they hit plays and they drove the football. You want to see him finish a little bit. The penalty set him back on the one drive. You got to be able to overcome those. Like Tom says, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. That drive they couldn't. Evans dropped the ball in the next play. That was a big part of it as well. So again, but other than that, they pretty much scored on every single drive after those first 2, other than the one where they had the penalty and the drop. And so, I thought the process was pretty good offensively. Could have easily led to more points if they had more drives. They didn't. So 26, you'll take it when you have 8 drives and one of them's just running the clock out. So, it's one of those things that you have to kind of evaluate the full context, but say, I'm curious to see what kind of approach they come out with offensively in this game, because I think, Scott, if they can get away from this, we got to run the ball on every first down type of mindset, and they start to throw more on first and put the running backs in more winnable situations on second and third and short, you might have the kind of balance that throws teams off. Someone mentioned, does the lack of a yak have something to do with the fact that the Bucs routes this season? I think it does, because I think most teams know it's coming. I think teams know it's coming a lot of the time. They're in a lot of pass offense situations.
It'll be interesting with Rojo being dressed and available for every game and starting every game at running back. If he misses this week, like we kind of think he will, either due to COVID or the pinky, without Rojo, does that prompt a new approach on first down for Byron Leftwich? Are they less comfortable running the ball with Leonard Fournette or LaShawn McCoy on first down? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that old habits die hard.
Let me dream, Scott. Let me dream.
But that was a great question from Mark Fisher about the yards after catch. And Mark Fisher also, who's a long time, Buccaneer Magazine subscriber way back in the day. I've not been able to do the cash pay here. I would gladly give a donation to Pewter Report on the homepage like I've done before. Greatly appreciate that, Mark. And if you, Pewter Nation, want to donate to pewterreport.com in this season of giving that we're in right now, we're making some significant upgrades to the website. Kind of a work in progress, as you may have seen, but it's getting
coming along now, Scott.
It's coming along, and we're going to be making some big upgrades to our Pewter Report podcast at the start of the new year as well. Getting some new cameras, especially for Mark Cook. So that's on the horizon, and that's how we use our donations. We don't go out for drinks and dinner and stuff. We pour it right back into our company resources to give you guys the best Bucs information possible. So if you want to donate, you can either do it here in the Super Chat, or you can go to pewterreport.com/donation, and there will take you to a page where you can pick whether you want to be a one-time donor for as little as $10 for your initial donation, or if you want to become a monthly donor for pewterreport.com, you can do that. We've got levels from $3 a month all the way to $9 a month. So we appreciate all of the generous support that our Buccaneer fans and Pewter Report readers and viewers and listeners have done for us this year and in years prior, and will do again for us in 2021. So just wanted to say thank you from Mark Fisher and all of you, Big Earn and Greg DeCruz and everybody that has done a super chat or a donation. We salute you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Scott, we got to get to predictions for this game. We've been keeping the people way over an hour with this podcast, and I know not one person has complained, but we are trying to keep them under. So let's get these previews out. Let's get these predictions out here. Would you like to go for? We both kind of tipped our hand already, but you go first in terms of breaking down what you think.
Well, before that, I'm going to throw in the Brier-Gaves.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about our friends over at Brier-Gaves.
Yep. So we're going to do that first and pay some bills. And
we should get their prediction for this game, honestly, if you talk to them this week.
I know. You know what? The thing is, I could probably, if I wasn't doing the show right now, I could email Sam or Briar, and they'd
probably
answer like that. Matter of fact, I did email him earlier, and I was a little disappointed. The lag time went from 4 minutes to 6 minutes. So it's a busy day today over at Brier-Gaves. But folks, that's the type of customer service you're going to get. If you go with a bigger company, you're going to call and you're going to get different people every time. You're not going to have that personal relationship. And I'm telling you, Mark Cook was right. I called Brier-Gaves. I got that personal relationship going with Brier-Gaves Insurance. A lot of homeowners, listen, they've had people, or I should say they've had their policies canceled or not renewed. They've seen maybe their homeowner company leave Florida, increase their rates significantly. One of those situations happened to me this year, and that's what prompted me to give Brier-Gaves a call. And I did, and I'm glad that I did, because these folks, not only have they served the greater Tampa Bay area for 30 years with homeowners insurance, auto insurance, boaters insurance, life insurance, commercial insurance for your business, and flood insurance, they're also big Bucs fans. And so how cool is that to actually have a conversation with somebody that has a common interest? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're proud sponsors of the Pewter Report podcast and on pewterreport.com. So do what I did. Call Brier-Gaves. There's the insurance information right there. The website, BrierGavesInsurance.com. Give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166 today. BrierGavesInsurance.com.
All right, I got to answer Jordan's question. Jordan, we really appreciate the super chat donation sending our way. He says, how many snaps last week did Edwards and Whitehead and Winfield play at the same time? How else besides that can we mitigate Devin White in coverage? This is a good question. I've actually wondered how often they've been on the field, but without charting every game, which I may do next season, but I didn't think of it till like partway through the season. And there's a lot of info out there already, but one of the things that isn't out there is how often, these guys play at the same time. I can see their snap counts. I just don't see how many of those snaps overlap. And so that's kind of the struggle right now with trying to evaluate that. I know that they've done some of it, but most of it has not been all three of them on the field at the same time. I know that. I just don't know the exact percentages. I would love to see all three of them on the same field at the same time, but we don't spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about things that are not going to happen. Devin White, it would floor me if the Bucs took him off the field at all. Like, he's played in every snap in 9 straight games. I just don't think it's going to happen. They're going to keep him on the field. I would love to see Jordan Whitehead in his place, especially in key games. I think the next 3 games, like, you evaluate it by game. If he's getting killed against Atlanta, you got to change course. But you got to have a plan B in place. I don't think they'll even have that. If they get to the playoffs and it's like, this matchup's just horrible for us with Devin, like, you got to have a plan in place. You have to be able to alter course and do some things differently to be successful. So it's a good question, Jordan. I wish I knew, exactly what their plan was moving forward. I do think that they can play Edwards and Winfield more high and play Whitehead down low with Levante David and be fine in all facets. And honestly, use Devin White as a rotational pass rusher. Get him some snaps off the field, but get him in as a pass rusher. Let him go off the edge and play Jason Pierre-Paul inside. He can win a matchup there. Even if Devin White gets blocked, I wrote about this past week. Ross Cockrell's blitzing off the edge against an offensive tackle. It's 5-on-5. The Bucs know he's getting picked up. It's not about what Ross Cockrell does. It's about the fact that you're getting 5-on-5, so somebody else can win. Jason Pierre-Paul can win. Shaq Barrett can win, and there's no help. William Golston bull rush all by himself against Garrett Bradbury. No help from the guard. Everybody sliding out to somebody. You got an incompletion forced on Kirk Cousins by blitzing Ross Cockrell, even though Ross Cockrell had nothing. Like, he wasn't around. Like, he was manhandled by the tackle. So even if Devin White gets destroyed by a tackle, which I don't think he's going to, you occupy different people and you get matchups at times. So I think you have to be more creative with how you use him. Early on in the year, he was blitzing more. He's still blitzing, but he's blitzing less on regularly on a per game basis. I just think you have to blitz him, and you can't blitz him that often. So just use him as a rusher and see what happens and get your best rushers on the field. So that's what I would do. All right, Scott. Greg thinks 31 to $10. What's your thoughts?
All right. Well, in looking at this matchup, and I'm looking at the points here, I think the Buccaneers win. John, what I like about this is it's a road game. The Buccaneers score more points on the road than they do at home. You go back and look at that game at Vegas, 45 to 20.
I'm going to say that game boosted it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, then you've also got the Panthers game, 46 to 23. Right. So now the Buccaneers were able to establish the run in both of those games, and that played a big role in the win. I don't think they're going to establish the run, but they're going to establish the pass, John. And I think the Buccaneers are going to put 40 points on the board.
Wow.
I do think that the Falcons will be able to pass the ball as well. This is going to be a little bit of a shootout game. I see the Buccaneers pulling away in the second half. I think they win this game 40-27. And the reason why I say 27 is because that's what they've given up to passing teams. The Vikings were a really balanced team, and I think that ended up costing them a little bit. They only put up 14 points. Of course, there was 10 missed points by Dan Bailey, so you almost have to think of that as a potential 24 points that the Vikings could have scored. So I think the Falcons put some points on the board. The Rams scored 27. The Chiefs scored 27. So I think the Falcons will score 27 because they're going to throw the ball. 40-27, Buccaneers win this one and get to 9 wins, which all but assures them of a playoff spot.
Big super chat from Robert Farmer. So we're going to go over the Robert's question. Robert, thank you. We appreciate the $10 donation. Do you think we'll start to use McCoy and Vaughn in more pass catching routes out of the backfield the same way Tom used James White in New England? It's not been something the Bucs have done a ton of. They've tried to develop the screen game. It has been miserable this season. I mean, it has been. The Steelers are one of the most unwatchable screen teams in the league. That's my team, obviously, and the Bucs are right up there, man. I mean, it's bad. So they have to get the timing down and those kinds of things for the screen game. If you're talking about more as actual route runners, flexed out wide, I would doubt that they'll deviate much from how they typically use these guys. Start them out wide, use them, bring them in motion, things like that. But I would be surprised if there's a big deviation in that capacity. All right, here we go. Somebody mentioned it. I know I never bring it up on the podcast, but I'm 12-1 this year picking Bucs games. I know I haven't mentioned that at any point. So
that's why we hired you, John, because you're better than me at picking these games.
I did not expect to be 12-1. That's very out of the ordinary. And it's also unsustainable. So I will not be repeating this performance next season.
You're getting a hell of a raise. I'm just going on record right now.
Yeah. If I go 15-1 this season and match it next year, then I mean, I think Hughes just got to make room for me at the top. So, but no, I think, this season, it's been kind of, again, matchups for the Bucs. That's been the thing that's thrown them more than anything else. And I don't see it in this game. There can be fluky things that happen. Sure. I mean, the Bears game was the one I got wrong this season. And I felt like if you play that game, 20 times, 19 times, the Bucs win, and they didn't win that one. And that certainly can happen because the Falcons are good enough at quarterback for that to take place, and still good enough at quarterback for that to take place. They can put points up, I think. But right now, I don't see the matchups to beat the Bucs. I think 40 would be great. That's possible. I think 33-21 is going to be the final score of this game. I think the Falcons score a little bit, but the Bucs pull away later in the game, and I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, we wanted to, certainly give our thoughts and prayers to Greg DeCruz, who is a longtime reader, listener, viewer, chat correspondent here in the Pewter Reports podcast on YouTube. Certainly with your wife's mom and dad being very sick in the hospital, we're happy to provide a distraction. And so certainly wanted to wish your in-laws some well wishes and a speedy recovery. And sorry to hear that news. So hopefully things will get better. And hopefully the Buccaneers come away with the win too, John, because I think that'd make everybody feel better heading into Christmas. So, John, you've got a podcast tomorrow. Yes. To be determined. Yes. Stay tuned to Twitter.
That's correct. Stay tuned to Twitter. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. tomorrow Eastern. We will be live. And I just got word, actually, just messaged me. The great and the wonderful Greg Allman will be joining us tomorrow on the podcast at 4 p.m.
Greg Allman on tomorrow's podcast from The Athletic, 4 o'clock. John and Greg talking Bucs, not just this year. Get into some of what your thoughts are going to be for next year, 2021, this offseason coming up. Greg is a great friend of Pewter Report, a longtime colleague, working with him at Raymond James and certainly at One Buccaneer Place. So that's going to be at one heck of a podcast. Great guest tomorrow. John, we're going to be back on Sunday, 8 o'clock.
Yes, 7:30. I think we're going to try and sneak it in before the night game. I think 7:30. 7:30
Sunday after the Bucs-Falcons game. Now the next week, that's the week of Christmas, right? So we're going to have our Monday podcast at 4 o'clock as usual.
that the week of Christmas? Christmas is happening? We just moved, Scott. I have no idea when Christmas is. If you
Yes.
I have any
Christmas
clue.
is Friday the 25th. So
Wow.
Christmas Eve is the 24th. So there will not be a Christmas Eve podcast. We're going to be spending that time with family, and we encourage you all to do the same. There's going to be a game on the day after Christmas on Saturday. So that's the caveat change. So next week, we've got Sunday's podcast at 7:30 following Bucs-Falcons. We have got the Monday post-game podcast at 4 o'clock. We will have the Bucs-Lions preview podcast Wednesday at 4 o'clock on December 23rd. No podcast on Christmas Eve. Then Saturday is Bucs-Lions at 1 o'clock. So we will have a podcast 7:30 Saturday night, right?
Yep.
So make sure you're there for that. And then we will see what the Bucs schedule is. If Bruce will be speaking Sunday, we might have our podcast on Sunday as opposed to Monday. So stay tuned for that. We'll have to see what the Bucs schedule is on a short-term week there with the holidays. Big Earn, really appreciate you supporting Greg. It's great to see Buccaneer fans come together. Thank you for that super chat, and we wanted to definitely mention that for sure. So, it's been a great week for the Buccaneers with the win on Sunday. A couple of great podcasts. Another great one coming up tomorrow with John and Greg Allman from The Athletic here on the Pewter Report podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We appreciate all y'all joining us. Looking forward to tomorrow and hope you'll join us again then and spread the news. Until then, thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.